They told you politics was about democracy, but behind every election there's still a throne. They told you power belongs to the people, but the people only choose between the illusions offered to them. And somewhere, in the shadows of every empire, a new prince is born, not crowned, not chosen, but forged, by necessity, by vision, by conflict. 500 years ago, Machiavelli wrote a book that no one wanted to read in public because it revealed too much. It stripped the illusion of morality from the machinery of rule. It showed how power isn't granted, it's designed. And now, in our age of votes, screens and data, the same game continues. Only the weapons have changed. The battlefield is narrative, the sword is perception, and the currency is attention. When the old rulers grow predictable, a new one emerges. Someone who understands not just what to say, but what to symbolize. Someone who doesn't fight power. He studies it, speaks its language, and bends it. This is not about one man, it's about an archetype. The modern Machiavellian who rises inside a system built to reject him, because every age creates its prince. And in ours, he wears no crown, carries no sword, but still commands the room without raising his voice. Power never disappears. It only changes form. It moves like water, flowing from monarchs to markets, from priests to algorithms, from thrones to the quiet glow of digital screens. And yet, every generation believes it has escaped it. Every society tells itself that this time is different, that freedom has replaced control, that democracy has replaced design. But power doesn't die because people wish it to. It adapts. Machiavelli saw this 5 centuries ago. He watched empires crumble not from war, but from comfort, from the illusion that virtue alone could sustain authority. He wrote The Prince not as a confession of cruelty, but as a manual for clarity. He warned, those who fail to understand power become its victims. And yet, we live in a time that fears that sentence. We fear the word power itself. As if speaking, it makes us complicit. We call it politics, leadership, influence, anything but what it truly is: control over outcomes. The modern world disguises control in participation. We vote, we post, we share, we debate, all the while believing that visibility equals agency. But power doesn't care about visibility. It thrives in the unseen, in institutions, incentives, algorithms, and whispers. Today's prince doesn't ride a horse through the city square. He rides the current of public opinion, invisible, yet omnipresent. He doesn't conquer with armies, he conquers with narrative. He doesn't command with fear. He guides through fascination. He has learned what Machiavelli already knew, that the people's love is fleeting, but their attention, if captured correctly, is infinite. This is the inheritance of power, the eternal dance between visibility and control. Every era builds its ruling class out of what it values most. In the past, it was land, then capital. Now it is perception, the ones who understand perception, who can bend belief, manipulate outrage, direct collective emotion. They are the new royalty. They don't need crowns. They own context. And that's why the new prince was inevitable. He doesn't rebel against the system. He rearranges it. He learns its language, algorithms, data, emotion, and uses it fluently. He doesn't need to overthrow power. He needs to translate it. Where Machiavelli studied princes and popes, the modern strategist studies trends and platforms. But the principle remains unchanged. He who controls the frame controls the outcome. We used to measure rulers by their ability to command armies. Now we measure them by their ability to command belief. Both require the same instinct, the understanding that human beings crave order more than freedom. And so, the new prince gives them order, beautifully packaged as liberation. He speaks the language of justice, equity, and reform. But behind every phrase lies the same calculus Machiavelli once described: how to hold the center while appearing to serve the edge. how to seem virtuous while staying untouchable, how to let the crowd believe they lead while quietly steering them through design. That's the paradox of modern rule. It looks democratic, but it operates strategically. And the new prince? He knows the game. He studies systems the way others study scripture, decoding the hidden rules that shape emotion into obedience. He watches how outrage can be monetized, how fear can be redirected, how identity can be engineered. He understands what Machiavelli meant when he said, "It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles." In other words, institutions are hollow without will. And in our time, will is not declared, it's designed. The inheritance of power isn't wealth, it's awareness. To see how influence hides behind virtue. To understand that every system has a script, and those who read it can rewrite it. You might think you're free because no one commands you, but what if command has evolved? What if control no longer needs chains, only consent? Every generation builds illusions of equality to hide the persistence of hierarchy. And yet, beneath the surface, someone always understands the truth. Power is not shared, it is managed, and the manager is always unseen. That is the role of the new prince, not to dominate, but to direct, to shape without showing, to design without dictating. He operates in plain sight, yet remains unreadable. Because true mastery isn't about being known, it's about being necessary. Machiavelli would have recognized him instantly, not as a tyrant, but as a student, a disciple of reality. Someone who sees through the moral fog and understands that good intentions without strategy build nothing but ruins. The old princes ruled by bloodline. The new prince rules by bandwidth. One inherited thrones, the other inherits attention. Both understand that humanity's greatest weakness is its hunger to believe, and so the cycle continues. From Florence to New York, from papal courts to digital platforms, from crowns to algorithms. The architecture of power evolves, but Machiavelli used a word that few understood, virtù. It didn't mean virtue as we know it, not goodness, not kindness, not moral purity. Virtù meant force of will, the capacity to shape events instead of being shaped by them. In the modern age, we replaced virtù with virtue signaling. We traded strategy for sincerity, and the powerful couldn't have asked for a better exchange. Because sincerity without strategy is obedience disguised as authenticity. The new prince understands this. He lives in a time where morality is currency, where people no longer trade in gold, but in virtue itself. Outrage, empathy, righteousness, these are the new instruments of control. To master them, he must study not ethics, but emotion. Virtù is not about cruelty, it's about precision. It's the ability to choose when to act, how to act, and why to act, even when the crowd demands something else. It's the discipline to look at chaos without blinking. It's the strength to remain silent when noise is rewarded. The weak think morality is protection. The wise know it is often camouflage. Machiavelli warned that a ruler who depends on virtue alone will be devoured by those who use virtue as theatre, and centuries later, we are surrounded by that theatre. Entire empires built on the optics of compassion, fairness, equality, each selling morality like a brand, while quietly designing systems of hierarchy underneath. Virtù, in contrast, is not theatrical, it is internal, invisible. It's not about appearing good, it's about remaining effective, and effectiveness, to the Machiavellian mind, is the truest form of morality, because it's the only thing that prevents chaos. The new prince has learned this lesson. He moves with empathy, but calculates with geometry. Every gesture, every silence, every word is measured not by how it feels, but by what it produces. He understands that the moral man is predictable, and predictability is the death of power. So he cultivates ambiguity. He speaks in paradoxes. He allows his image to be interpreted in multiple ways because confusion breeds control. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good and use that knowledge when necessary." To modern ears, that sounds cruel, but in truth, it is survival. Because systems built on perception are ruthless toward those who act purely. Virtù is the art of timing morality, the power to decide when goodness serves stability, and when it threatens it. Every reformer, every revolutionary, every leader who truly changes things carries a piece of Machiavelli's realism inside them, even if they never admit it. Because no movement survives on emotion alone. Emotion ignites, strategy endures. The new prince knows how to balance both, the language of hope with the logic of control. He offers meaning to the masses, but direction to the structure. He tells the people they are free, while quietly building systems that channel that freedom toward productivity, not rebellion. It's not deception, it's design. Because chaos doesn't liberate, it consumes. The true ruler doesn't suppress chaos, he organizes it. He allows enough freedom to keep people believing and enough control to keep order intact. Virtù is the invisible hand guiding this balance. It's not about ruthlessness, it's about clarity. To see humans not as saints or sinners, but as predictable creatures of need and fear. To design a world that uses those forces, instead of pretending they don't exist. The masses crave leaders who feel, but power belongs to those who think, to those who can detach from sentiment long enough to perceive the architecture behind emotion. That's why the new prince doesn't moralize. He listens. He studies the rhythm of outrage, the waves of attention, the currency of sympathy, and he converts them into influence. He knows that in the modern age, virtue is optics and outrage is commerce, and those who master the flow of both become untouchable. Virtù is not coldness, it's composure. It's not manipulation, it's understanding. Because to understand the machine doesn't make you evil, it makes you lucid. Machiavelli once said that fortune is like a river. When it floods, it sweeps everything away. But the prudent man builds dikes and channels. Virtù is that prudence, the awareness to prepare before the flood, to act before crisis demands reaction, to anticipate what others only feel. That's what separates the leader from the participant. The new prince doesn't seek control for vanity. He seeks it because someone must steer the ship, and those who refuse to learn the mechanics of power will always drown in its consequences. Virtù is not about domination, it's about design. It's the realization that power, like fire, burns only those who touch it carelessly. So he wields it with discipline, not as a tyrant, but as an architect. He builds frameworks where others build slogans. He moves slowly, invisibly, deliberately, turning every emotional storm into fuel. The world mistakes his patience for passivity, but patience, to the Machiavellian, is the purest form of strength, because he knows reaction is control surrendered. The new prince is not moral in the way the crowd defines morality. He is moral in the way the universe defines balance, not through sentiment, but through stability. He doesn't speak of justice, he engineers it. Power is no longer a thing you hold, it's a story you tell, and a story others believe. Once, rulers built castles of stone. Now, they build castles of perception. Their walls are made of narrative, and their armies are made of attention. Virtù, new prince understands this. He knows that control doesn't come from authority. It comes from framing reality itself. To rule in the modern age, one doesn't command the sword, one commands the story. Machiavelli hinted at this centuries ago when he wrote that a prince must appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious. Not necessarily be so, but appear so. He understood that perception is power's first armor and belief its sharpest weapon. The crowd sees what they are shown, and what they are shown becomes what they believe. Because perception isn't a mirror, it's a design. The new prince doesn't conquer territory. He conquers context. He shapes what people interpret as truth, and truth, once shaped, becomes the foundation of control. He has learned the sacred algorithm of influence. Emotion outruns logic. Image overpowers substance. Repetition builds reality. This is not cynicism, it's comprehension. The world does not move by facts, it moves by feeling. And whoever directs feeling directs the future. In an age of noise, the powerful understand silence. In a sea of outrage, they master restraint. They let chaos speak first, then define its meaning. That is how perception becomes empire. Machiavelli knew this before Twitter, before screens, before the global marketplace of emotion. He warned that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, meaning they judge not what is, but what seems. The wise ruler therefore becomes an artist of seeming. And the new prince, he is fluent in this art. He doesn't fight against illusion, he refines it. Because illusion, properly managed, becomes structure. Every empire, even the digital ones, runs on perception management. Every leader sells hope, fear, or identity, three currencies that never lose value. The difference lies in how consciously they do it. The masses react, the rulers design. That is the architecture of influence, the transformation of emotion into infrastructure. It begins with a symbol, a word, a face, something the crowd can project meaning onto. The more vague the symbol, the more powerful it becomes, because vagueness invites ownership. People don't follow leaders, they follow reflections of themselves in leaders. The new prince understands this human vanity. He becomes a mirror, not a monument. He allows others to see their ideals in him: justice, rebellion, progress, order. He becomes what they need him to be, and in that fluidity, he becomes indispensable. To build such influence, he doesn't need propaganda, he needs precision. A few well-timed gestures, a handful of silences, a posture that suggests confidence without arrogance. Because in a world saturated with noise, stillness is radical. It attracts curiosity, and curiosity is the seed of belief. He knows that the crowd's memory is short, but their desire is endless. So he gives them rhythm instead of reason, repetition wrapped in resonance. He lets their emotions loop until obedience feels like choice. This is not manipulation, it's structure, the same structure that underlies art, religion, politics, and branding alike. Influence is architecture built from repetition and ritual, and the most powerful architecture is invisible. A well-built illusion doesn't hide the truth, it replaces it. When the audience believes what you've built more deeply than what they can verify, you've crossed the threshold from persuasion to reality design. That's how empires are born in the 21st century. Not by force, but by framing. Machiavelli might have called it strategic theatre. In his world, the prince had to balance fear and love. In ours, the new prince balances chaos and coherence, offering just enough clarity to be trusted and just enough mystery to be mythologized. He knows the secret of modern influence. Authenticity is now performance. Sincerity is now strategy. And narrative is the only truth the public defends with passion. That's why the most dangerous thing today isn't censorship, it's saturation. Drown people in too many truths and they'll beg for simplicity. The one who provides it becomes their oracle. The new prince doesn't argue, he curates. He selects which truths survive. He doesn't tell people what to think, he shapes how they think. He redefines the borders of imagination. This is what Machiavelli meant by necessitar, the necessity to act in ways the times require. And our times require mastery of the unseen, influence that operates not through force, but through framing. The modern prince doesn't need soldiers, he needs symbols. He doesn't build monuments, he builds meaning. He doesn't demand loyalty, he manufactures alignment. And perhaps the most dangerous part is, he does all of this while appearing benevolent. He doesn't call it control, he calls it progress. He doesn't call it power is not taken, it is maintained. And maintenance requires discipline, the kind that is invisible, methodical, merciless only in its restraint. Machiavelli wrote that fortune governs half of our actions, but leaves the other half to our free will. The weak spend their lives chasing fortune. The powerful study the other half, the realm of control. Because control is not about domination. It is about calibration. To control, one must first master one's own impulses, the hunger for approval, the reflex to defend, the ego that demands to be understood. The new prince has learned this truth early. The first throne he must conquer is within himself. He understands that chaos does not only exist in the streets, it exists in the mind, and he rules it through silence. Machiavelli would have called this self-command prudenza, the ability to act only when action amplifies power, and to wait when noise would only reveal weakness. To the impatient, power looks like luck. To the disciplined, it looks like design. The new prince cultivates an inner stillness that unnerves those around him. While others speak to be seen, he observes to understand. In the age of instant reaction, his calm is an act of rebellion. He knows that the one who reacts first loses first, because reaction is a confession, a signal that you have been moved. Control begins with indifference, not apathy, but choice. The decision to remain unmoved until movement becomes necessary. This discipline is not emotionless. It's selective. It's knowing that outrage is expensive, that attention is currency, that silence, when used precisely, buys influence cheaper than words ever could. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear generous while being frugal, merciful while being cautious, faithful while being flexible. In the same way, the new prince controls not through domination, but through rhythm, a pulse of presence and absence that keeps others orbiting around his stillness. He practices what modern minds call emotional detachment, but Machiavelli would have called it wisdom. Because the more emotionally predictable a man becomes, the easier he is to rule. And so, the new prince remains unreadable. Not mysterious for the sake of theatre, but disciplined in the art of invisibility. He allows others to project their desires onto him. He becomes what they need. A symbol, a solution, a savior, but never reveals his own hunger. Power is not only built by what you say, it is protected by what you refuse to say. He listens more than he speaks, and in that silence, information flows toward him, confessions, loyalties, insecurities. Because people mistake silence for empathy, and in doing so, they give him everything he needs to rule them. Control is built not through force, but through understanding. To rule men, one must know their patterns, their fears, their hopes, their thresholds of discomfort. The new prince studies these like maps. He knows that every man carries a hidden lever, and once found, that lever moves entire rooms. He doesn't pull it crudely. He waits. He positions. He lets people walk into their own persuasion. This is the discipline of psychological power, to make others act as if it was their own idea. Machiavelli wrote that, "The wise man does at once what the fool does, finally." The new prince has perfected this timing. He acts before others even know an opportunity exists, and when they do notice, it's already irreversible. He rules by anticipation, not reaction. His greatest strength is consistency, not loud success, but steady presence. Because consistency creates inevitability, and inevitability breeds obedience. He knows that people follow momentum more than ideology. Give them direction, give them stability, and they will surrender freedom in exchange for predictability. That is the quiet cruelty of control. No chains, no orders, no threats, just design. a system so seamless that submission feels like preference. Machiavelli saw this in his princes. The modern world sees it in its systems. But the principle is eternal. Control that feels natural is control that lasts. And yet, the new prince carries a paradox. To maintain power, he must not become addicted to it, because addiction makes rulers reckless, and recklessness invites revolt. So he practices detachment even from his own influence. He learns when to withdraw, when to let others believe they lead. He allows credit to circulate because in a system of ego, the one who doesn't compete becomes the axis. He doesn't dominate conversations. He frames them. He doesn't silence opposition. He absorbs it. He lets dissent define his contrast. For without contrast, power loses its depth. Every empire eventually collapses under its own noise, but those who endure, they master quiet. The new prince is not loud. He doesn't demand attention. He commands it through precision, through pacing, through patience. Discipline to him is not suppression, it's architecture. Each restraint is a stone in the foundation of endurance. Because power without control is just impulse amplified, and impulse destroys faster than any enemy. That is why he studies himself more than his rivals. He measures his reactions like an engineer measures weight. He adjusts, refines, and withdraws. He lives in delayed motion, always a few steps behind emotion, a few steps ahead of collapse. In this stillness, power ceases to feel like struggle. It becomes 500 years ago, a man in exile sat by candlelight and wrote the most dangerous book in history. He had no army, no wealth, no throne, only a pen and the courage to describe humanity as it was, not as it pretended to be. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and his sin was honesty. He didn't invent manipulation, he revealed it. He didn't corrupt politics. He explained why it was already corrupted, and for that, the world exiled him, because nothing is more threatening to illusion than clarity. But ideas, like empires, never die. They hibernate, waiting for a new generation to rediscover their use. Today, Machiavelli's ghost walks again, not in Florence, but in the hearts of those who study systems instead of slogans. Those who understand that morality without structure collapses, and that structure without morality consumes. The new prince is not one man. He is a pattern, a consciousness rising again in the age of optics and algorithms. He walks among modern rulers, strategists, reformers, even artists. Anyone who builds influence not through power's image, but through power's design. He doesn't wear velvet robes or carry swords. He wears perception. He carries understanding. And his battlefield is invisible, fought in attention spans, narratives, and collective emotions. He knows that the new wars are not for land, but for belief. That the strongest empires are built not on walls, but on worldviews. That every ideology, every brand, every institution is simply a container for control. Machiavelli's ghost whispers, people will always prefer comfort over truth. So, the wise man gives them comforting truths, while quietly engineering their reality. That is not cynicism, it is clarity, because truth, left unguarded, is powerless. It must be shaped, directed, embodied, or it vanishes beneath noise. The new prince understands that awareness alone doesn't change systems. Strategy does. He studies power as a physicist studies energy, observing how it moves, how it transfers, how it transforms. He knows that power is never owned. It's rented from perception, from faith, from time. And every lease must be renewed through relevance. That's why the new prince never clings to identity. He evolves. He reinvents faster than others can define him. He plays contradiction, like an instrument, appearing progressive to the idealists, pragmatic to the realists, visionary to the lost. This fluidity isn't deception. It's survival in a world where certainty is extinction. Machiavelli would have admired this. He wrote that the greatest rulers were those who could change with fortune, who could bend when others broke. He called it adaptability. Today, we call it rebranding, repositioning, recalibration. Different words, same principle. He who resists evolution dies in relevance, but evolution alone isn't enough. The new prince must also design legacy, not through monuments, but through systems that outlive his name. He builds frameworks others depend on. He embeds himself in processes, in infrastructure, in policy, in narrative. He doesn't need to be remembered, only necessary. That's the highest form of control. To remain unseen but indispensable. The true Machiavellian doesn't crave fame. He craves permanence, because fame is attention, fleeting and fickle. Permanence is architecture, invisible, structural, eternal. The new prince builds architecture. He crafts laws, movements, and technologies that shape how others think, long after he's gone. He doesn't fight for power. He builds environments where power naturally flows toward him, and through that flow, Machiavelli's ghost continues to breathe, not in manipulation, but in understanding, because the essence of his philosophy was never evil. It was clarity born from disappointment, wisdom carved from the ruins of naivete. He wrote not for tyrants, but for survivors, for those who wanted to see the world as it is and still play. And that is what the new prince represents: the rebirth of clarity in an age of confusion, the return of strategy in an age of spectacle, the quiet triumph of intelligence in a world addicted to outrage. He reminds us that control is not oppression, it is stewardship. That manipulation, in its truest form, is guidance, the shaping of chaos into coherence. But there is a danger too. Because every age that rediscovers Machiavelli risks misreading him, confusing realism for ruthlessness, pragmatism for cynicism, and discipline for tyranny. The new prince must walk a knife's edge, balancing insight with integrity, because without ethics, strategy becomes predation, and without strategy, ethics becomes impotence. Machiavelli's ghost watches from the threshold between those two extremes, smiling, perhaps, at humanity's eternal cycle. How every generation builds ideals, breaks them, then rediscovers him again. Maybe that's the real secret of power, that it can never be destroyed, only inherited, passed from the cunning to the conscious, from those who play blindly to those who play deliberately. And in that passing, the shape of the world changes, not through revolution, but through realization. Power, Machiavelli reminds us, is not a sin. It's a substance, neutral, volatile, eternal. And those who understand it can turn it into light. That is the rebirth he foresaw. Not a return to tyranny, but a return to lucidity. Because the moment you see how power really moves, you stop being